Kiddushin Daf Lamed Bet Amud Aleph and Amud Bet. Invest in ideas, not in things. In Torah Dilehu. We're learning in Masechta Kiddushin about investing in the most intimate relationship that we have. And one of the intimate relationships that we have is the relationship between a Jew and the Torah. That's a relationship of intimacy and passion. It's not a relationship of distance and cold clinical analysis. It's a passionate, intimate relationship. Ownership applies to things. You can own an object. But we've talked about kinyan in Kiddushin. Isha niknes, not as a woman is owned, but a woman is invested in bishlosha drachim. There are three ways by which to invest in a woman. And so too, although you can own objects, you can invest in ideas. You can't own ideas, but you can invest in ideas. And when you invest in ideas, you become very attached to those ideas. Those ideas become part of you. Not only do you become part of the ideas also become part of you. Our sugi has been talking about kibud aveim, as we know, and one of the questions that is dealt with is ha'av shemachal al kvodo. Is a father entitled to say to a son, you don't have to be mechabed me, you don't have to be to honor me, it's fine, it's good, you don't have to stand up when I walk into the room, you can sit in my seat, I'm meichel. Because one of the things we see in this piece of Gemara is kovod belongs to a person. My father always used to teach that if you don't give somebody the kavod, the honor to which he is due, you've stolen something from him. Kavod belongs to a person. The kavod to which a person is due through the position that he or she occupies or the efforts they've put into it, that's something they own. It's an asset. Kavod, reputation, is an asset. And if you damage somebody's kavod, you damage somebody's honor, somebody's dignity, somebody's reputation, apart from everything else, you're actually taking something away from them. If kavod is owned by the father, is he free to be mochel? You can be mochel, something you own. You can own something and forgo it. Say, I don't need it. Can a father do that? The Gemara says, yes. However, harav shemachal kvodo ein kvodo machul. A rav is not allowed to be mochel on his kavod. A rav cannot say, when I walk in, you don't have to stand up because the kavod doesn't belong to him. If the kavod belongs to you, then you can be mochel, you can forgo it. But the kavod of a rav belongs to the Torah. And since the kavod of a rav belongs to the Torah, it's not his to give away. It's not his to be mochel. You can't be mochel on the kavod of a rav. Rav Yosef Amar afilu rav shemachal kvodo kvodo machul. And Rav Yosef says, no, even a rav is allowed to say, you don't have to serve me. Shenema v'Hashem olech lifnehem yomam. It says in the Torah, Hashem walked before Bnei Israel in the daytime. He didn't send an angel. He himself served them. He walked there for them. He protected them. What's the king doing? Walking in front of his people and protecting them and serving them. We talk also in the sugi about Avram serving the three visitors that came to him. You see that there are cases of the Rav being mochel, of foregoing his honor. Amar Rava says, Rabbi, how can you make a comparison? Hatam HaKadosh Baruch Hu alma dilehu v'Torah dilehi mechel eliyakre. The world belongs to Hashem and the Torah belongs to Hashem. Hashem is entitled to be mochel. It's his. Hacha Torah dilehi? Does the Torah belong to a Rav that he has the right to be mochel on kavod HaTorah? It's one of the things I'm trying desperately to teach in Ra'anana. Kavod HaTorah. There's a lot of limud HaTorah. Baruch Hashem, there's more limud HaTorah now. There's more learning of Torah in Ra'anana than there's been maybe ever, which is wonderful. But kavod HaTorah, what is it to have honor for Torah? I'm having a lot of pleasure from a book that Ricky gave me, the biography of Paul Reichman, of the Reichmans who built the World Financial Center in New York when New York was run down and depressed. He bought and he built a whole area of derelict New York, and he did the same in Canary Wharf in London. Just an unbelievable person. Many cities. He transformed the cities. But what's important about him is he was a massive Talmud Chacham and a big tzaddik. And this book is very, very inspirational. One of the things is every picture of him when he's sitting in a shiur, in yeshiva, wherever he is, he's sitting in a shiur, sitting with a jacket and a hat. And he talks about how shocked he was when he got to gates at yeshiva and he saw that sometimes in the Beis HaMedrash, not in a shiur everybody wore a jacket and a hat, but in the Beis HaMedrash sometimes they took their jackets off and he was shocked. Like, how can you do that? You're learning Torah. The idea of kavod HaTorah, what it is to show kavod to Torah. That's why I get upset when people walk through, when we're busy learning Torah in a shiur and people walk through and I say they wouldn't do that in a symphony orchestra. There's a band conducting and an orchestra playing. He's not going to walk up and down in front of it. He has kavod for a symphony. But Torah, No kavod for Torah. It's one of the things I'm trying to teach. Kavod HaTorah, what it is to have honor for Torah. Says the Gemara, HaTorah Dיליה. Do you even have the right to say it's okay if you walk through? You don't have the right to say that's not your kavod. It's the Torah's kavod. You're a guardian of the Torah. You've got to protect the Torah. Same as you've got these guards in museums, and if you behave incorrectly there, they'll ask you to leave. It's not because of their kavod. It's not throwing their own weight around. It's the kavod of the museum, of the art gallery. So when it comes to a shul, when it comes to a Beis HaMedrash, when it comes to a shiur, somebody should say, please leave. If that's how you want to behave here, there's the door. That's not how you behave in a shul. Imagine that happening in Ra'anana and many other places. But it needs to happen. That's exactly what has to happen. That's kavod HaTorah. Otherwise, how do we learn kavod HaTorah? Hadar Amar Rava, then Rava said, in Torah Dיליה, you know what? Torah does belong to the Rav, and he is entitled to forgo over that. Dichtivu v'torato yegeh yomam v'layla, because it says on the Talmud Chacham studies his Torah day and night. Whose Torah? His own Torah. Says Rashi, uv'torato yegeh ki b'torat Hashem cheftzor v'torato yegeh b'tchilai nikre torat Hashem. In the beginning it's called Hashem's Torah. And later on in the Pasuk it says, u'mishalam dava girsa, when you really apply yourself and you've learned to know, and you know the Torah, yinikret torato, it's your Torah. The Torah belongs to you. A Talmud Chacham is so intimate with the Torah that it's his, like his wife is his. Not that it's ownership, but you don't own the Torah. Of course the Torah still belongs to the Rebbeinu Shalom. When Reb Chaim Shmuel Levis used to teach us this Gemara, he made it very clear that it's not that you take the Torah away from Hashem, it's Hashem's Torah. But you and the Torah become one. And that's why it's called your Torah. Like you and your wife become vayuyu lebasar echad. They become one unit. A Talmid Chacham and the Torah becomes one unit, and therefore he has the right to be able to say, it's okay if you don't show me kavod. This idea that the Torah can be invested in, like a woman can be invested in. That's why it's here in Kiddushin. Like you invest in a relationship with a woman, you invest in a relationship with the Torah. HaTorah niknes b'arba'im u'shmona dvorim. That word niknes is used in Pirkei Avot, in the 6th parak of Pirkei Avot, that the Torah is acquired in 48 different ways. There are 48 things to do in order to acquire the Torah, in order to get intimate with the Torah. That's why, by the way, I find Simchas Torah such a difficult Yom Tov, because it hurts me to see people who don't show kavod HaTorah 364 days of the year, and Simchas Torah, they're dancing around the Torah. That same Torah that they didn't show kavod for, that same Torah that they didn't study in awe, that they didn't sit back and think, oh my goodness, this Torah, how do I behave when I'm learning Torah? How do I think when I'm learning Torah? How do I speak when I'm learning Torah? How do I treat a Beis HaMedrash? How do I treat a Rov? How do I treat Talmidei Chachomim? If it didn't go through all that, hasn't thought about these 48 ways by which to become intimate in the Torah, he's dancing with the Torah. It's like a man's dancing with a woman who isn't his wife. Have you made the Torah yours, that it gives you the right to dance with it on Simchas Torah? And if you haven't made the Torah yours, what right have you got to be dancing with the Torah on Simchas Torah? It's not a simple thing that we just assume, but that's as part of the casualness with which we relate to the Torah. And there's something charming about the casualness, but we've also lost a dimension that is very important. What does it mean to acquire the Torah? So we learned on Daf Chav Hey, the introduction of Kinyan by Malki Tzedek to Avrom, when he says, Hashem is konei shamayim v'aretz. Hashem is konei. What does that mean? We have 3 perushim here. We have Rashi that says Hashem owns. How did he acquire the world? It's Rashi because he made it. If you create something, you own it. That's how Rashi learns it. The Ramban says, no, it's also mikneh, the loshon of kinyan. Hashem acquired it, it's his. The difficulty with Malki Tzedek's posuk is normally when you acquire something, koneh normally means you buy it. Who did he buy the world from? It seems to imply that there was somebody there before Hashem. That's the difficulty. Says Rashi, no, it means Hashem created it. That's one of the ways that you own something is through creation. Says the Ramban, it doesn't have to be through creation. You can acquire something from Hefker. You can acquire something that didn't belong to anybody else before. This means Hashem owns the world and can do with it as he pleases. And Rabbeinu Chaya brings based on the Medrash that it does actually mean shekana'an me'acher. This here does mean he acquired it from somebody else, meaning the world as we see it, he acquired from the raw material. I spoke on Sunday night at the Kollel dinner about that first atom created on the first day that had within it the potential for the whole creation. From that, Hashem was koineh. He formed it. So you can own something by creating it. You can own something by zechir, by getting it, by getting the rights to it, and you can own something because you formed it. You took the raw material and you developed the raw material into something finished, and it's the same with Torah. The Torah can become yours. What do you need to do to make the Torah yours so that you can dance with it on Torah, that you have invested in the Torah sufficiently for you to have an intimate relationship with the Torah? What do? Either you're creative, you're mechadish in Torah, you develop new thinking in Torah, or you've invested in, and we'll see in a moment how, the Ramban's way, or according to Rabbeinu Bechaya, you've developed it. You've taken what you've learned from your Rabbeim and you've taken the ideas further. You've developed the ideas further. Those are the ways you're Koine Torah. These 48 ways of being Koine Torah, I just want to give you an exposure to the most beautiful analysis, something everybody needs to learn. In the Tiferes Israel, it's 19th century Germany. He's a Talmud of Rabbi Akiva Eiger, a very, very original thinker, writes a Perush on the Mishnah, and he talks about Yiknei ota ovelo socher. Acquiring something means you get the rights to give it away also. So if you want to acquire Torah in such a way that you can teach the Torah, you can pass it on. It's yours so that you can pass it on. These are the 48 things that you've got to invest in. And if you just look at some of them, firstly, a Talmud. You've got to tzarich sheyekableim mirav. You've got to get the Torah from a Rebbe. There's got to be Masorah. You can't pick it up in the street. That's not where Torah comes from. Torah comes from a Rebbe. Bishmiat ozen. You've got to apply your ear to when you're listening to the Rebbe teaching. There's nothing else going on. There's no cell phone going on. You're not one eye on the screen or on something else, or on the television screen, or on somebody who walks in. It's just shmias ozen. You're just listening to the Torah. There's nothing else in your mind. Ba'arichat sfatayim, that's that you can say it over either what the Rebbe told you or what you learned in a sefer she'az ha'mechaber hu melamdo. Treat your sforim as rabbeim. Give them the respect and the time and understand them. They're human beings, they're real, they're standing in front of you. The sforim in front of you, you have connections and relationships, they're not sources of information. The sforim are rabbeim. And treat them as a Rebbe. Learn with them, study with them, love them, work with them. Bevinas halev lisbonein bidvorim sheshoma. Give yourself the time to reflect. Don't just rush through more and more information. If you want to become intimate with Torah, it's like rushing through a relationship with a woman. You spend years investing in a woman. So it is with Torah. Lihitbonein bidvorim sheshoma. When you've heard a piece of learning, you've had a Matmonim in the morning, spend the day thinking about it. You've learned a Tosfos, you've learned a Medrash, you've learned a Chumash and Rashi. Spend a few hours thinking about it. Developing the idea, let it develop. Don't just rush off onto the next thing. How can you learn if you're going to do that? Besichlut halev, histaklut besod. Peer at the secret, deep meaning that you can't articulate. There's part of the Torah you can't articulate. We're very quick to talk. We've got something to say. I've got a word to say. I've got a Torah to say. We're quick to say. But there's part of the Torah you can't say. There's that part of the iceberg which is under the surface. The tip of the iceberg is only there if there's a whole lot under the surface. You've got to do that too. And be'ema, we talked about that. Be'yishuv, says the Tiferes Israel, you should also know what's going on in the world. Be well versed in derech eretz, what's happening in the business world, what's happening in the scientific world, what's happening in the artistic world, because that will give you insights into the Torah, because it's all part of the Torah. And you need to have that as well. That's what yishuv means. B'miyut sheina, don't sleep too much. He says, the Rambam says, he used to sleep 8 hours. He said that was only when he was young. When you're older, you only need 5 or 6 hours. Your mind needs to be active. If your mind stays inactive for too long while you're sleeping, that's not a way you're going to get great in Torah. B'miyut tzicha, the other two are very beautiful too, because b'miyut tzicha doesn't mean by reducing your conversation. He says, u'miyutoy afela Torah. It doesn't mean miyut tzicha, just a little bit of conversation. Don't have to much. He says what it means, b'miyut tzicha, make sure you do have some conversation. Interact with people. Engage with people, just in day-to-day matters. Connect with people with conversation. Have conversation, just not too much. B'miyut tzchok, and have a sense of humor. You need to have a sense of humor too. It doesn't mean reduce your sense of humor. It means make sure you've got sense of humor. B'miyut, a little bit, but make sure you've got, because you need that in order to make your Torah fresh and alert and vital and attractive. You need a sense of humor. These are things that you need. So this Mishnah is something that you should learn with the Tiferes Israel and understand what it is to be koine Torah, to get to a point where, as Rashi says, that he nikret Torat Hashem or mishelamda. Once you've learned v'garsa and you've acquired, you've actually made the Torah yours in the ways we've just discussed. He nikret Torato, so that this in fact becomes your own Torah. This is my Torah. This is the Torah I'm intimate with. This is the Torah I know and the Torah I understand. The Torah I love, the Torah I dance with on Simchas Torah, because I've learned this Mishnah in Perek Vov of Pirkei Avos with the Tiferes Yisrael, and I live by the 48 ways that the Mishnah tells me to live by, so that the Torah becomes dilehi, it becomes your own.